I think that we have a really good group. We're still a tight-knit group. We're adding new players in that are amazing. O's been around the league for a long time, and I know you don't think so, but it's a blessing that you were on another team because we need you here. And so I just think it's an adjustment period.
Let's set the stage, because this story has everything: drama, injuries, fines, referees acting like they've got a vendetta, and Sophie Cunningham turning into the WNBA's unofficial villain-hero hybrid, depending on which side of the Twitter timeline you live on. The WNBA season was already chaotic, but then Sophie decided to add fuel to the fire by going off on the officials again. Yes, again, right after she suffered a season-ending knee injury. And now, for the third time this year, the league has slapped her with a major fine. At this point, Cunningham might as well have her paycheck direct deposited straight into the WNBA's Referees Protection Program Fund. It's like clockwork. Sophie plays, Sophie complains, Sophie gets fined. Rinse and repeat.
Sophie, let's talk about those threes. You had two of them. Dante's just had one. How big of a spark was that for this group?
Yeah, we got to get it going. We're just playing slow, playing a little bit sloppy. They're outworking us, and that's just not part of our DNA. So we got to pick it up on the defensive end.
But before we dive into the deliciously sarcastic details of Cunningham versus the WNBA referees, let's rewind for anyone who hasn't been keeping score. Sophie Cunningham, former Phoenix Mercury guard forward, 27 years old, known for being as fiery as she is fearless, is the kind of player who divides fans instantly. Her teammates love her intensity, her opponents love to hate it, and the refs? Well, judging by the fines, the refs probably have her name on a dartboard in the locker room. Cunningham has built her brand on being unapologetically tough, unfiltered in interviews, and never one to back down from calling out the stripes when she thinks the game's integrity has gone off the rails. And believe me, she thinks the rails are gone.
Played the old team. You know, there was maybe a little bit of beef because of our last podcast.
You think this is becoming a rival?
Our teams don't really like each other anyway, just because of I don't know, just kind of like her leaving. Some of those players used to be under our coaching staff, and so there's just a lot there.
Now here's the kicker. This latest fine didn't just come because she chirped at the refs after a random Tuesday night game. Nope. This came after what should have been one of the lowest moments of her season. Cunningham tore her MCL, a brutal injury that ended her 2025 campaign, just as the Fever were fighting to keep their playoff hopes alive. For most players, that's the moment you post the inspirational Instagram story, thank the fans, and quietly disappear into surgery and rehab. But Sophie? Not a chance. Instead, she doubled down on blasting the officiating, basically telling the world that the WNBA referees don't protect players, the physicality is out of control, and that her injury wasn't just bad luck. It was a direct result of incompetent game management. And that, folks, is where the league said, "All right, Sophie, hand us your wallet again."
Like our first week, what people had to say, well, the WNBA fined me. They fined me $1,500.
Third fine of the year. Third. We're not even done with the season yet, and the woman has practically paid for a new scoreboard at Barclays Center with her penalties. You'd think she was trying to set a record at this point. But let's pause the sarcasm for a second and actually unpack the seriousness here, because Sophie does have a point buried underneath all the fiery sound bites. Injuries in the WNBA this season have been piling up like crazy. We're talking Caitlin Clark missing time with a groin strain, Sophie herself with the MCL tear, players like Kalia Copper, Eriko Gunbowl, and even Brianna Stewart dealing with nagging issues, plus several others sidelined with knee and ankle problems. And when you look at the tape, a lot of these injuries come from plays that make you wonder, where was the whistle?
When it is a simple call right in front of your face multiple times, what are you doing?
What call are you bugged out?
All of them.
Most?
I'm like, what? I'm like, this is just the beginning.
In Cunningham's case, it was a hard collision that left her knee shredded. She argued, loudly, that the refs had been letting the game get too physical all night, swallowing their whistles until somebody paid the price. And she just so happened to be that somebody. So instead of just rehabbing in silence, she aired it all out, accusing the league of not protecting its players. From her perspective, the refs weren't doing their jobs, the league wasn't holding them accountable, and as a result, her season, and maybe the Fever's playoff chances, were ruined. Cue the WNBA's disciplinary hammer. Now, whether you agree with Sophie or not depends on how you see her role in the league. To some fans, she's a refreshing truth teller, the kind of player who refuses to sugarcoat things and speaks for athletes who feel silenced by fines and PR pressure. To others, she's reckless, always looking for someone else to blame, turning every bump and bruise into a conspiracy theory against the refs.
So many people said that Bria Hartley did this to Sophie on purpose. Now, we reviewed the play in our last video where Bria Hartley, she's driving to the baseline, she's going for a skip pass across the way. Sophie comes over for help side defense, and that is when the two collide. Bria Hartley falls over.
And if you're one of those people, this third fine probably made you roll your eyes so hard you saw your brain. But here's where it gets juicy. This isn't just about Sophie Cunningham being loud. This is about a long-standing tension that's been simmering between players and referees all season long. Caitlin Clark has already had her viral moments jawing at refs. Kelsey Plum's gotten into it. Aya Wilson has raised eyebrows about inconsistent calls. It feels like every single night, some team is storming onto social media posting freeze frames of elbows, hacks, and body slams that somehow get labeled as clean defense. Sophie just happens to be the loudest of the bunch. And thanks to her injury, the one with the strongest case that this lack of whistle discipline has real consequences. Meanwhile, the Indiana Fever? They're spiraling. This was already a roster fighting tooth and nail just to survive a brutal season and cling to a playoff spot. Cunningham was a key piece, one of the team's emotional leaders, and now she's sidelined indefinitely. Combine that with the lineup already stretched thin by injuries, and the entire squad looking like a mash unit, and the timing couldn't be worse.
And then there was also a photo circulating online where Bria Hartley's kind of on the ground and she's looking up, and it looks like she's smiling. She's kind of like, it looks like she's smiling from this photo, and Sophie is grabbing her knee in the photo.
Losing Cunningham's firepower, grit, and energy is a massive blow, especially with the playoff race tighter than ever. So instead of rallying her teammates with on-court heroics, Sophie's rallying headlines with post-game blasts that cost her thousands of dollars a pop. And the league? They're clearly drawing a line in the sand, making her the poster child for speak against the refs, and we will make you pay. If this were the NBA, she might be pulling a Draymond Green podcast after every fine move, but in the WNBA, the fines sting a whole lot more because those paychecks aren't exactly NBA sized to begin with.
It's like, you're kidding.
Oh, way.
I email our GM, and she pulls me aside and she goes, "Come here, Soph, I have to talk to you." And this was in like front of everybody. And I was like, what did I do now?
Every dollar Sophie hands over to the league office is a serious chunk of her earnings, which only adds more fuel to her argument. Why should I keep my mouth shut if refs aren't protecting us? And this is where things get really interesting, because Sophie's fight isn't happening in a vacuum. Fans are rallying behind her online, pointing out that the WNBA has had an officiating crisis brewing for years, with accusations of bias, inconsistency, and even outright incompetence. Meanwhile, her critics are saying, "Hey Sophie, maybe focus on rehab instead of starting beef with referees while you're on crutches." It's the kind of polarizing debate that keeps her in the headlines and, let's be real, keeps people clicking. So that's where we are. Sophie Cunningham's season is over, her wallet is lighter, and the WNBA is trying to send a message that they're not here for open season ref slander, even if players keep getting hurt in suspiciously physical games. And honestly, this whole saga is setting up part 2 of this story perfectly, because Cunningham's history with fines isn't new. She's been at war with the whistle all season long. Alright, let's get into the part that really makes WNBA fans clutch their coffee mugs, the referees. Yes, the same officials who seem to have a personal vendetta against the Indiana Fever, or at least that's what every Fever fan on Twitter swears on. This isn't hyperbole. It's a season-long saga of inconsistent whistles, questionable calls, and in Sophie Cunningham's case, fines that feel like punishment for just existing. Picture this. You're a Fever player, the roster is already decimated by injuries, Cunningham out, Caitlin Clark recovering, Sydney Colson sidelined, and every other guard and wing battling some kind of tweak or strain. And now you have to play a game where the refs appear to be running their own reality show. Every bump, every hard screen, every aggressive drive to the rim seems to get scrutinized differently depending on which team it favors. The Fever go up for a rebound and get called for a foul. Meanwhile, the opposing team swings an elbow, plants a shoulder, or basically performs a small wrestling maneuver. And nothing. Nada. Silence.
What is it about this group where resiliency, things like what happened to Sophie, what is it about them that seems to bring the best out in them?
It's gonna be hard to talk about without getting emotional. I mean, first and foremost, they're good human beings.
You can almost hear the refs saying, carry on, nothing to see here. Sophie Cunningham, of course, noticed this pattern immediately. She's not the type to let a physical mismatch or inconsistent officiating slide, especially when it's endangering her teammates and, frankly, her own body. Her post-game rants weren't just emotional outbursts. They were pointed critiques, highlighting that the league's enforcement, or lack thereof, was creating dangerous conditions on the court. And yet, each time she opens her mouth, the league responds predictably: a fine. The message is clear. We don't care if you're right, we care that you said it out loud. Now, let's break down the implications. The Indiana Fever, already limping through the season with half their key rotation injured, are now facing games where officiating is a variable they can't control. And in basketball, that's huge. Every whistle, every no call can shift momentum, affect rotations, and ultimately alter playoff outcomes. Imagine a close game against a team like the Minnesota Lynx or the Connecticut Sun, where one missed call leads to a fast break bucket, which forces your guards to play extra minutes, which pushes fatigue levels through the roof, which increases the risk of injury, rinse, and repeat. That's the exact spiral the Fever are battling. Fans have noticed too. Social media is a riot of Fever supporters posting clips with captions like, "Watch Sophie get hacked and the refs call her for the foul. This is exactly why she's mad." Memes show Sophie as the ref whisperer, pointing at every questionable call with dollar signs flying out of her fines. Analysts on podcasts are dissecting every play, agreeing that the league's officiating inconsistency is affecting the competitive balance. Even local reporters covering Indiana games have started noting patterns.
Now, Sophie basically addressed this and she was like, I'm friends with Bria. I do not think that she did this on purpose. She wouldn't do this on purpose. She would not hurt me. Like, I'm actually really close with her. So she wanted to address it on her podcast to kind of cool that narrative.
The Fever seem to face harsher consequences for the same infractions that other teams get away with. Whether this is conscious bias or just bad luck in officiating, it doesn't change the fact that it's becoming a real headache for Indiana. And it gets worse when you factor in playoff implications. Indiana is clinging to the 8th seed in a league that's razor-thin this year. Every loss is a dagger, every inconsistent call a potential playoff swing. If the Fever can't get a fair whistle, it doesn't just hurt morale, it affects wins and losses, which at this stage of the season is basically the difference between making the postseason and watching from home. Cunningham's absence only magnifies this. She was a stabilizing force on offense, a leader on defense, and a vocal advocate for holding the refs accountable in real time. Without her, the Fever are more vulnerable than ever. So what does all this mean for the Fever? Well, on court, it means fatigue, frustration, and mounting pressure. Off court, it means their star guard is being fined, the social media narrative is chaotic, and every game carries more weight than ever before. Every possession matters. Every foul or non-foul becomes a talking point. And as we inch closer to the playoffs, the stakes are astronomical. One bad call could tip a game, shift the standings, or force a key player into risking re-injury to stay competitive. And let's not forget the psychological element. Players know they're being scrutinized, both for performance and demeanor. Cunningham's boldness is inspiring for teammates, but it also paints a target on the back of every Fever player. Referees might unconsciously, or consciously, call things differently when someone like Sophie is on the court, creating a subtle yet impactful mental strain. Combine that with the thin roster, the grueling travel schedule, and the mounting injuries, and you've got a team playing a high-stakes chess match with one hand tied behind their back. At the same time, this drama makes for compelling narratives. Media coverage explodes, highlight reels of controversial plays go viral, and fans debate endlessly. Is Cunningham justified? Are the refs overreacting? Is this a league-wide officiating issue, or just a targeted one against the Fever? The answer? Probably a little bit of everything, but in the world of social media, nuance doesn't get clicks. Outrage, drama, and fines do. So the Fever continue to play under a unique combination of challenges. Injuries that force backup players into roles they weren't prepared for, playoff positioning that leaves no room for error, and officiating that's inconsistent at best and punitive at worst. Sophie Cunningham's fines are the tangible representation of these challenges, proof that being vocal has a cost. And while she's sidelined recovering from her MCL injury, her absence is felt not just on the stat sheet, but in the team's morale and resilience. The players have to pick up the slack without her spark, while navigating games where the officiating feels like another opponent. In short, The Indiana Fever are fighting on three fronts: the calendar, the opponent, and the referees. And Sophie Cunningham? She's already shown she's willing to fight all three at once, fines be damned. Whether she's right, wrong, or somewhere in between, her voice is shaping a larger conversation about player safety, officiating consistency, and league accountability. It's a storm of drama that makes every Fever game must-watch, whether you're a fan of Indiana or just a connoisseur of WNBA chaos. And here's your cliffhanger, folks. Will the Indiana Fever make it through the gauntlet of late-season games? Will Sophie Cunningham return to the floor and reclaim her rightful influence without accruing more fines? Can Kelsey Mitchell, Aaliyah Boston, and the patchwork roster hold the fort long enough to sneak into the playoffs? Only time, sweat, and a healthy dose of sarcastic commentary will tell. So if you want to see how this soap opera continues, keep your notifications on, follow the Fever through their roller coaster season, and brace yourself for more fines, more drama, and yes, probably more memes. Click like, subscribe, and hit that bell because trust me, you won't want to miss the next episode of Sophie Cunningham vs. the WNBA, the musical. And remember, if the refs ever come for your favorite player, you can always meme your way through the heartbreak.